My friends, I want to begin tonight with a question that, once you really sit with it, is going to change the way you walk through every single day of your life. When you are not paying attention to anything, what is your brain doing? Think about it. You walk from one room to another. You wait at a red light. You stand in the shower. You queue at the coffee shop. You scroll through your phone. You lie in bed before sleep. In every one of those moments, you are not actively focused on a task. You are not solving a problem. You are not consciously thinking. You are simply here, on autopilot, going through the motions. So, what is your brain doing in those moments? You may assume the answer is nothing, that when you are not paying attention, your brain is at rest, idling, quiet, waiting for the next task to arrive. That is the natural assumption, and it is one of the most consequential misunderstandings of how the human mind works. Because neuroscience has discovered, over the last 2 decades, something that changes everything. Your brain is not idle when you are not paying attention. Your brain is at its most active. There is an entire network in your brain, a real, measurable, mapped network that lights up the moment you stop focusing on the outside world. And that network does not turn off. It does not rest. It is running constantly, beneath everything else, generating the very thing your life is being built out of. They call it the default mode network. And tonight I am going to show you what it is, what it does, and why it has been quietly running your life for as long as you have been alive, whether you knew it was there or not. This is the teaching almost no one in this space gives. And by the end, you will see that the law of assumption and modern neuroscience are saying the exact same thing in two different languages. And you will see with a kind of clarity that does not fade why your life looks the way it does, and how to begin deliberately to change it. Let me show you what neuroscientists have actually discovered, because the picture is more astonishing than people realize. For a long time, scientists assumed that when a person was not actively engaged in a task, the brain went quiet. They thought of the brain like a muscle that switched off when not in use. So when they put people in scanners and watched their brains during rest, they expected to see a slowdown, a dimming, a pause. What they found was the opposite. The moment a person stopped focusing on the outside world, the moment they stopped solving a math problem, stopped following a conversation, stopped paying attention to an external task, a different set of brain regions lit up, vividly, consistently, in every person tested. A whole network came online, and it stayed online, humming until the next external task pulled focus away from it. This network was so reliable, so constant, so present in every brain when not externally focused, that they named it the default mode network. Because it is the brain's default, the thing your brain does when it is not doing anything else, the thing your brain returns to automatically every time your attention drifts from the outer world. And here is what this network is doing in those moments. This is the part that should stop you in your tracks. The default mode network is the seat of your inner narrative. It is the part of your brain that generates the voice in your head. It is the part that imagines the future. It is the part that replays the past. It is the part that constructs your self-identity, the running story of who you are, what you are like, what is and is not possible for someone like you. It is the part that talks to you about other people, about your relationships, about your worries, about your dreams. It is the part that daydreams. It is the part that worries. It is the part that, in the quiet moments, generates the entire ongoing movie of your inner life. And it is running constantly every time you are not actively focused on something external, which, if you add it up honestly, is most of your day. Right now, in your life, you have an entire neural network broadcasting an inner narrative beneath every unfocused moment. While you brushed your teeth this morning, it was running. While you stood waiting for the kettle, it was running. While you drove to work, it was running. While you scrolled, while you waited, while you walked, while you fell asleep, it was running, generating thoughts, generating images, generating predictions, generating identity, continuously, for decades. And you have been mistaking this constant background broadcast for just being yourself. Here is what I want you to feel now, because it changes everything. That voice in your head, the running commentary that narrates your day, the one that talks to you about the email you have to send, the way that person looked at you, what you should have said yesterday, what might go wrong tomorrow, what you are like, what your life is like, what is and is not possible for someone like you. That voice is not you in the way you have been assuming. That voice is a network, a pattern of brain activity, a particular set of regions humming together to generate a particular kind of output. And the output it has been generating has not been chosen by you. It has been generating it on default, on autopilot, running the same loops it has been running for years, with very little of your conscious involvement. You think of yourself as the author of your inner life. You think the thoughts in your head are your thoughts, in the sense that you have selected them, examined them, endorsed them. The truth is something quieter and more startling. Most of the thoughts in your head are simply what your default mode network produces, automatically, in the absence of external focus. They arrive unbidden, they run their loops, they generate their conclusions. And you, sitting somewhere underneath all of it, mistake the output for the truth. You see how strange this is. You have been listening to a network that was running long before you started paying attention to it, and assuming that what it was saying was the truth about your life. But the network does not know the truth about your life. The network only knows what it has been trained over years to generate. And what it has been trained to generate is whatever has been repeated again and again in the unfocused moments of your existence, by your upbringing, by your culture, by your experiences, by the loops you fell into long ago and never thought to question. The default mode network is not telling you the truth. The default mode network is running its programming. And the programming was installed by a life that is now in the past. And every time you drift into an unfocused moment and let the network speak, it speaks the same programming again, and you absorb it again, and your sense of who you are and what is possible deepens along those same old grooves again. This is the autopilot. This is what is meant by manifesting on autopilot. You have been broadcasting all day, every day, in every unfocused moment, a narrative you did not consciously choose. And your life, faithful, obedient, mirror-like, has been reflecting that narrative back to you in the form of conditions, opportunities, relationships, and outcomes. You have not been manifesting badly. You have been manifesting constantly. You simply have not been the one choosing what gets manifested. The network has been choosing, and the network has been choosing on default settings installed years ago. Now I want to show you something that, once you see it, will collapse the distance between everything spiritual teachers have ever said about the inner life and what modern science is now confirming in laboratories. The law of assumption has always said one thing, in many different ways, that your inner state generates your outer reality, that whatever you assume to be true about yourself and your life with feeling becomes your experience, that the inner conversation is the loom on which your world is woven. For a long time, this was treated as poetic, as spiritual, as something that perhaps was true in a metaphorical sense, but could not be tested or measured. And then neuroscience, without intending to, walked straight into the same teaching from the other direction. The default mode network is the law of assumption made visible in brain tissue. It is the physical, measurable, observable seat of the inner conversation. It is the part of the brain that holds your self-concept, generates your inner narrative, predicts your future, and runs your assumptions about reality. And these things are not just happening privately, in the dark. They are shaping how you perceive the world, what you notice, what you remember, what you predict, and what you choose in every moment of every day. The brain, as we now know, is a prediction machine. It does not see the world fresh. It generates a model of what reality should be and compares incoming experience to that model. And the default mode network is one of the primary places that model is built and maintained. The model your brain uses to interpret your life, what to expect, what to notice, what is and is not possible, is being constructed and reinforced by your default mode network every time it runs. So when the law of assumption says what you assume becomes your experience, what is actually happening mechanically is this. Your assumptions are being held and reinforced by your default mode network. Those assumptions shape the predictive model your brain runs. The predictive model determines what you perceive, what you notice, how you interpret events, what you remember, what feels possible. Your behavior follows from that perception. Your choices follow from that behavior. The events you encounter follow from your choices. The conditions of your life follow from the events. And so, in the most concrete possible way, the inner narrative of your default mode network becomes the outer conditions of your life, not by magic, by mechanism. The law of assumption is not separate from how the brain works. It is how the brain works. The spiritual teaching and the neuroscience are pointing at the same thing. This is why this lecture matters. Because the moment you understand that the default mode network is the engine of your assumptions, and that your assumptions are the seed of your conditions, you have your hand on the actual lever, not a metaphor, not a wish, the actual lever, the thing that, when you operate it deliberately, changes everything that follows. Let me show you now why the autopilot of the default mode network is so good at repeating the past, and so bad at producing anything new. The default mode network is, by its nature, a pattern network. It runs habitual loops. It generates the same kinds of thoughts in the same kinds of situations again and again, because those loops have been reinforced by repetition over years. The more often you have thought a particular thought, run a particular worry, told yourself a particular story about who you are, the more deeply that pattern is grooved into the network, and the more easily it activates in any unfocused moment. This is why your inner narrative feels so familiar. It is not because you are choosing it fresh each time. It is because your default mode network has been running the same loops for so long that they have become its preferred route. Like a path in a forest, worn smooth by decades of walking, the network slips down the same neural paths every time you stop paying attention to anything else. And those paths, almost without exception, run through the past. The default mode network rehearses old memories, replays old conflicts, reaffirms old beliefs, predicts the future based on what already happened. This is its job. It is built to maintain continuity of self by drawing constantly on what has come before. It is quite literally designed to keep your sense of self consistent, which means consistent with who you have been. And here is the consequence. When you live on autopilot, you are not creating your future. You are generating a future that is a continuation of your past. Your default mode network, left to itself, will faithfully run the loops it has always run, generate the narrative it has always generated, reinforce the assumptions it has always held, and your life, shaped by those assumptions, will continue to deliver the same flavor of conditions it has always delivered. This is why people feel stuck, not because life is genuinely refusing to change, because the network underneath their life is, by its design, continuing. It is broadcasting a continuation of the past in every unfocused moment, and that broadcast is what reality keeps responding to. The outer life cannot change while the inner network keeps running the old program. The mirror cannot show a different reflection while the same shape stands in front of it. The autopilot is not malicious. It is not punishing you. It is doing exactly what it was built to do: maintain continuity. And continuity is the enemy of change. This is why simply wanting a different life almost never produces one. Wanting is something you do in your focused, conscious mind for a few minutes a day. Meanwhile, your default mode network is running its old program for the other 23 hours and 55 minutes. The conscious wanting cannot compete with the unconscious broadcasting. The network wins every time, unless something changes at the level of the network itself. So how do you change the network? How do you stop being a passive passenger of an inner broadcast you did not choose? How do you become the one who decides what your default mode network is generating? The good news is that the default mode network is plastic. It can be retrained. Neuroscientists have demonstrated this in many ways. The patterns it runs are not fixed. They can be reshaped, not by force, not by trying harder, but by consistent inputs over time. The network will faithfully deepen whatever paths are walked most often. So if you begin walking new paths, even a little, those new paths will over time become as automatic as the old ones. The autopilot will simply switch to a new default. This is the entire mechanism of inner transformation. You are not trying to silence the network. You are not trying to defeat it. You are giving it new material to run until the new material becomes its default. The old loops fade not because you fought them, but because you stopped walking them and started walking new ones. Here is how this looks practically. First, notice when the network is running. This is the foundation. Most people are unconscious of the default mode network. They live inside its output without ever realizing it has output. Begin to notice the unfocused moments, the kettle, the cue, the walk, the shower, the drive, and notice what the network is saying. Not to fight it, simply to see it. You cannot retrain a network you cannot perceive. Awareness comes first. Awareness is what gives you a foothold outside the broadcast. Second, recognize the loops. Once you can see what the network is saying, you will start to notice the same loops appearing again and again. The same worry, the same memory, the same story about yourself, the same prediction about the future. These are the grooved paths in the forest. These are the ones the network walks on default. Name them. Get to know them. You are not trying to make them stop. You are getting your bearings. There is the loop about not being enough. There is the loop about being behind. There is the loop about being unlucky. Naming them weakens their grip, because a loop you can see is no longer a loop you are inside. Third, give the network new material. This is the heart of the practice. Whenever you find yourself in an unfocused moment, instead of letting the network default to its old loops, gently feed it something new, the inner state of the version of you who already has what you want. The casual, settled posture of the person whose default is having, not lacking. Even 30 seconds of this, in an unfocused moment, is a vote. Each vote is a small new path being walked in the forest. At first, the new paths are faint, and the old ones are still obvious. Walk the new ones anyway. The path you walk wins. Fourth, do this many times a day, rather than once for an hour. This is crucial, because the default mode network is shaped by repetition, not by intensity. Sitting down for an hour-long visualization once a week will not move the needle if your network spends the other 167 hours running its old program. You retrain a network by frequency, many small returns to the new state, distributed throughout the day, in the unfocused moments that used to belong to the autopilot. Each return is a path walking. Each return is the network being told, this is what we do now. After enough returns, the new becomes the default. Fifth, use the threshold of sleep. The default mode network is particularly active just before sleep and just after waking. These moments are when whatever you carry across the threshold sinks most deeply into the network. So in the last conscious minute before sleep, deliberately feed the network the inner state you want as your new default. Not for an hour, just a minute. Because in that minute, the material lands somewhere it will not land in the middle of a busy afternoon. Repeat this every night. Over weeks, the network's default begins to shift, not because you forced it, but because you fed it consistently at the moment it was most absorbent. This is how you take the network off autopilot, not by silencing it, by becoming the one who chooses its input. The network will keep running because it has to. It is what your brain does. But what it runs is no longer the residue of your past. It is the material of the future you are deliberately building. I want to leave you with a picture of what this looks like over time, because it is not as dramatic as people imagine, and the lack of drama is exactly why most people miss it. When you begin to retrain your default mode network, the change is not visible immediately. The old loops still run for a while. The autopilot still drifts toward the familiar grooves. You will notice the network again and again slipping back into its old material. This is normal. The forest is full of well-worn paths, and the new ones are still faint. But something quiet begins to happen. After a few weeks, you start to notice that the old loops have somehow weakened. The worry that used to run constantly arrives less often, and when it arrives, it is shorter. The story you used to tell yourself about not being enough comes up, but you catch it sooner. The future you used to predict with dread feels a little less inevitable. The default is still the default, but it is loosening. The grip is softening. A few weeks more, and the new material begins to feel natural. The unfocused moments start to drift, not toward the old loops, but toward the new state. You find yourself in the queue, in the kettle moment, in the small unguarded breath, simply being the version of you who has what you want, not as a discipline, but as a quiet default. The network has begun to walk the new paths. A few months in, and you cannot quite remember when the old loops stopped running. You are not free of them entirely. They show up sometimes, but they are no longer the home base. The home base has moved. The new state is now what your brain runs when nothing else is happening. And the conditions of your life, slowly, then suddenly, begin to rearrange themselves to match. This is the quiet revolution, not a dramatic transformation, not a single moment of awakening. A slow, steady, consistent rewriting of the network underneath your life, performed in the small, unfocused moments most people throw away, until the autopilot itself is running on new instructions and your life faithfully begins to deliver new conditions. You will look up one day and realize that the version of you you have been quietly becoming in those small moments has finally caught up with the outer world, and you will not be able to point to the day it happened. You will only know that it has. So here is what I want you to take with you tonight, into every unfocused moment of tomorrow. Your brain has a default. It is running right now, beneath every unguarded breath, generating the inner broadcast that has been shaping your life for as long as you have been alive. You did not choose it. You inherited it, and you have been mistaking its output for who you are. But it can be changed, not by force, by consistency, by becoming, in the small, unfocused moments, the one who decides what the network gets to run. By feeding it, again and again, the material of the version of you for whom the thing you want is already normal. By treating every kettle, every cue, every breath before sleep as another small vote for the new path through the forest. The autopilot has been manifesting your life on default settings installed long ago. Tonight, you take the controls. Not all at once, not perfectly, simply by beginning, by noticing, by naming the loops, by walking, even for a few seconds, a new path that has been waiting for you to discover it. Your brain is going to run something in every unfocused moment of your life. That is not optional. The only question is, what is it going to run? The old default, or the new one you are deliberately building? You are not powerless against the autopilot. You are the one who can program it. And every small return, every quiet 30 seconds of being the version of you who has it, is a line of new code being written into the network that will, in time, run your entire life. So tonight, before you sleep, give the network 1 minute of the new material. Just one. Feel, in your body, the state of the version of you who already has what you want. Carry it across the threshold of sleep. Let it sink in. And tomorrow, in the small moments, the kettle, the cue, the unguarded breath, return to it briefly, again and again, with no strain, no drama, no force, just a quiet feeding of the network with the future you are building. The autopilot has been running you long enough. It is time for you to begin, gently, to run it. You are not the victim of your inner narrative. You are its author. You always were. You only needed to remember to pick up the pen. Thank you and good evening. This is Best of Lectures. I will see you in the next video.